have been working as a curator at the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California, for over a decade. This mansion, built by Sarah Winchester, widow of the rifle magnate William Wirt Winchester, is renowned for its labyrinthine architecture and eerie history. Sarah believes she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and that continuous construction would appease them. Thus, from 1884 until her death in 1922, the mansion was in a constant state of building, resulting in a sprawling, enigmatic structure. One stormy evening, as the museum was closing, I noticed a light flickering in the distant corridors of the mansion. Knowing all tours had ended and the staff had left, I decided to investigate. The rain battered against the stained glass windows and the wind howled through the eaves, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. Armed with only a flashlight, I ventured into the depths of the house, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. The mansion's interior is a maze of winding hallways, staircases leading to nowhere, and doors opening into walls. As I navigated this labyrinth, the sense of unease grew. The air was heavy, and the usual creaks and groans of the old house seemed amplified. Turning a corner, I entered the seance room, a place where Sarah purportedly communicated with the spirits guiding her construction. The room was cold, and an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I rushed to open it, but it was locked tight. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. The flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced on the ornate wallpaper. In the dim light, I saw a figure reflected in the antique mirror on the wall. A woman in Victorian attire, her eyes hollow and sorrowful. My heart pounded as I spun around, but the room was empty. The temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath forming misty clouds. Whispers filled the room, unintelligible but filled with anguish. The walls seemed to close in, and the ornate patterns on the wallpaper twisted into grotesque faces. Desperation took hold, and I banged on, the door shouting for help, but my voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. Just as suddenly as it had locked, the door creaked open. I stumbled out, gasping for air, and fled down the corridor. The mansion seemed to come alive around me. Doors slammed, footsteps echoed, and ghostly figures appeared at the edge of my vision. I navigated the convoluted passages, my only thought, to escape the oppressive presence pursuing me. Finally, I burst into the main foyer, drenched in sweat and trembling. The storm outside had subsided, and the house was eerily quiet. I glanced back at the darkened hallways, half expecting to see the spectral woman watching me. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence of the Winchester Mystery House. To this day, I cannot explain what happened that night, but I know one thing. The spirits Sarah Winchester feared are still very much present within those walls.
I have been working as a night security guard at the Cleveland Museum of Art in Ohio for 5 years. During the day, this place is one of the most respected museums in the country, with grand halls filled with masterpieces. But at night, when the lights go out and the visitors leave, the museum transforms into something completely different. I have always felt that something was wrong here. It's not the kind of silence that feels empty. It's the kind that feels full, as if something unseen is always watching. Some co-workers spoke about shadows moving in the corridors, whispers between the sculptures, but I never believed them until that night. It was a cold November morning. I was making my usual rounds through the Egyptian artifacts wing. Glass cases displayed well-preserved sarcophagi, burial relics and statues of ancient gods. The air always felt heavier there, as if something unseen was following me as I walked. Then I heard a sound, a soft scratching like nails dragging against glass. I stopped and held my breath. I turned my flashlight to the source of the noise. One of the ancient golden death masks. The glass was fogged up, as if something had breathed from the inside. My heart pounded. That wasn't possible. I blinked a few times and stepped closer. The display case began to tremble slightly, as if something inside was trying to escape. Then a loud crack shattered the silence. The glass split on its own, thin fractures spreading like a spider web. A sharp, unnatural chill ran down my spine. I instinctively backed away, goosebumps rising on my skin. The silence was then broken by something worse. Slow, shuffling footsteps behind me. I spun around, but the corridor was empty. Only the shadows of sculptures stretched along the dimly lit walls. A whisper filled the air, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything I recognized. Some guttural, hissing language that sent ice through my veins. My body locked up, frozen in place, as if something invisible had gripped me. My flashlight flickered, and when I aimed it back at the golden mask, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The hollow eye sockets, once empty, now pulsed with a swirling blackness, like something was staring back at me from inside. The floor beneath me seemed to tremble. The shadows along the walls began to twist and move, despite the lack of light shifting around them. I ran, panic taking over. The paintings on the walls seemed to watch me as I passed, Renaissance portraits warping into grotesque expressions, their eyes following my every move. The corridors stretched unnaturally long, turning the museum into a living maze, trapping me within its nightmare. At last, I reached the main foyer. The towering marble statue of a goddess stood there as always, but something was wrong. Her head, once raised in divine serenity, was now tilted downward, staring at me. Her stone eyes pulsed, as if filling with something dark and alive. Behind me, the sound of shattering glass grew louder. I knew if I turned around, I would see something my mind wasn't meant to comprehend. With one final, desperate effort, I sprinted to the main door and threw myself outside. The freezing night air hit me like a shock, but I didn't stop. I ran to the security booth and only then dared to look back. The museum stood silent and still as if nothing had happened, but I knew the truth. Something inside had awakened, something that was never meant to be disturbed. The next day, I quit my job. I never set foot in that museum again, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear that whisper in my head. And worst of all, sometimes, I still feel like I'm being watched.
It was a crisp autumn evening when I first stepped into the Forgotten Museum. Nestled on the outskirts of a quiet town, the museum was known for its rare and bizarre collection of artifacts, most of which were rumored to have sinister origins. The building itself was ancient, with crumbling stone walls and ivy creeping up its exterior. As I walked through the heavy oak doors, the air inside felt unusually cold, as though it had been trapped in time. The museum was eerily quiet, with only the sound of my footsteps echoing through the vast halls. The exhibits were displayed in dimly lit alcoves, their details barely visible in the shadowy gloom. As I wandered through the rooms, I began to feel a sense of unease, as if the objects themselves were watching me, their eyes following my every move. I came across a room filled with old paintings, their colors faded and frames cracked. One in particular caught my eye, a portrait of a man with hollow eyes, his expression twisted into a grotesque grin. I felt an unsettling chill as I stared at the painting, as if the man was somehow aware of my presence. My pulse quickened, and I quickly turned away, but when I glanced back, I swear the man in the painting was smiling even more. The museum grew darker as I moved deeper into its labyrinthine halls. I stumbled upon a narrow, dimly lit staircase that seemed to lead down into the bowels of the building. Hesitant but driven by curiosity, I descended into the unknown. The air grew colder with each step, and the walls seemed to close in around me, making me feel trapped. At the bottom of the staircase, I found a small hidden room. Inside was a display case containing an ancient, weathered book. Its pages were yellowed with age, and strange symbols were scrawled across its cover. The book seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and I felt an overwhelming urge to open it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the cover, and the moment I did, a low, guttural whisper filled the air. Suddenly, the room grew unbearably cold, and I could hear the faint sound of footsteps approaching from behind. Panic surged through me as I slammed the book shut and turned to flee, but the hallway was no longer the same. The once familiar route back to the stairs was now a twisting maze of endless corridors, all leading deeper into the heart of the museum. I ran, desperately searching for an exit, but every turn only brought me further into the darkness. The whispers grew louder, and shadows seemed to stretch and warp around me. I could feel something or someone close behind, just out of sight. My heart raced, and I stumbled over the uneven floor, my breath coming in short gasps. Eventually, I burst into a room that seemed familiar, the one with the old paintings. But now, the portrait of the man was gone. In its place was a mirror reflecting my own wide-eyed expression. As I stared into the glass, I saw a shadowy figure standing just behind me, its cold breath brushing the back of my neck. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Panicked, I rushed back toward the entrance, only to find the door now locked tight, its wooden frame splintered as if something had tried to break through. My attempts to escape were in vain. The museum had swallowed me whole. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the sound of the whispering voices, growing louder and more distinct as they chanted an ancient, unearthly incantation. The forgotten museum had claimed another soul. To this day, I can still hear those whispers, calling me back to the cursed halls where I was lost forever.
If you enjoyed these real horror stories and want more chilling tales, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep bringing you the scariest stories from around the world. And if you've ever had a terrifying experience, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear it. If you dare,